Bobo's back with you here at 3 Zen. So just over a year ago, few days to a year, anyway, I was down at the 560th Flying Training Squadron at Randolph Air Force Base in San Antonio for the annual 560th sponsored POW Dining In, where we commemorated the service of our North Vietnamese POWs. Not the North Vietnamese guys, the American guys. I care less about the North Vietnamese guys that were prisoners of war. Anyway, you get the idea. So anyway, we're down there for this function, and we were given just very gracious treatment by the members of the 560th. Part of that included a simulator ride in the sims they now have in the squadron, and those were quite the thing. They were really quite the cat's ass. Now, I'd never seen one of these in operation, so I kind of, like so many others, just kind of poo-pawed at the idea. But man, once I got into it, I had a hell of a time getting out of it. I had so much fun. Now, mind you, I haven't flown the 38 since 1988. I did have one ride in 2006, an orientation ride, if you will, but really nothing serious since I retired in 1988. So I get in this thing, climb up and sit down on it, and acclimate myself to it. It just took a couple minutes. They've got a lot of different presentations than I had in the A model of 38. This was a C model, but I got the basics, airspeed and altitude and so forth. But the thing that got me was the visual presentation. Once I put on the goggles, it was fantastic. It was amazing. So anyway, I put these goggles on, and the guy fires it up for me, and he says, "Where do you want to be?" And I said, "Well, I'd like to be at Randolph on runway, what the heck was it, 14. It's now 13. Of course it is. Inflation, I guess. I don't know what the hell. But anyway, I know what it is. Magnetic, okay. Bunch of magic. So anyway, I get put on that runway, and he cuts me loose. And I run the throttles up and go through the nursery rhymes, RPM, EGT, nozzles, fuel flow, oil pressure, sticks good, release brakes, and so forth. And down the runway I rolled. Checking runway alignment, airspeed, runway alignment, start back pressure about 125, just kind of ease it up. Comes off. God, I love this, Gear, flaps at the end of the runway, accelerating nicely, 300 knots, 280 knots, pull it out of burn, and then just smartly snap it into a nice turn. And using the TLAR method, I head over to Seguin. What's TLAR, you ask? Well, you kind of put some inputs in and say, that looks about right. So I just kind of winged it over there, climbed up to 2,500 feet, and I'm picking up visual references. Man, I'm very familiar with all this. I mean, I've seen it thousands of times. So I head on over, line up, make another right-hand turn, looking out on the horizon, pick up Seguin. This is so cool. And I decided, okay, the first time, let's go ahead and just do a straight in. That'll be fine. So I come in like normal, and at the appropriate point, gear, flaps, and then start down the chute and picking up the runway now. Really, really comfortable with it all. Come in, as I come across the threshold, bring the power to idle. Now I know from prior experience that we would fly like advanced red over wheat. So even after years of flying the A320 and the DC-9 and being acclimated to that steeper flight path, I kind of flattened it out a little bit. And so I did. Came across the threshold, pulled the power to idle, touched down well within 1,000 feet of the down the runway, and I just sat there and went, yeah, let's do that again. So I added the power, got airborne, gear, flaps, didn't have to request a close, there wasn't anybody there. So anyway, I just pulled it up into a closed pattern, came back around, final turn, did that again, and then headed out the area. I had a blast. And the other guys were in the other sims and so forth. I got totally lost in that simulator that day. So I go over there flying around San Antonio, having a look at various landmarks. It is so bloody hard. The airspeed we flew at, 300 knots, to pick out the Alamo. And I didn't find it that day either. But the way you find it, I once did a flyby over the Alamo. And the way you find it is you offset from the Tower of Americas, for those of you who are familiar. That's the only way I could find it. But anyway, just flew around a little bit and then came back to Randolph. And I was going to do some touch and goes back at Randolph when I heard one of the guys say, "Would you just run his ass out of gas? We want to go to lunch." And I'm sitting there thinking, who are they talking about? I'm having a ball here. And I look down at my gas gauges and they're going down to, okay, fine, I guess it is time. All good things have to come to an end. On the image that I'm using for this, you'll see me in the goggles flying the thing. And you'll see a good friend of mine, John H. He's sitting there just kind of looking at me like, are you crazy or what? Anyway, we come in, land, and go to lunch, and I just kept, man, I was fired up about that. It was just so much fun. And I understand they're going to come out with updated models to those simulators. I'm hoping those go on the marketplace on Facebook. I'm keeping my eye out for one of them because it was just too much fun. So I'm going to tie this story up with a little discussion about John H. As per the tradition, on Friday afternoon of the dining in, the squadron would usually take former POWs that they were able to identify and take them for a ride in a 38. That these are guys that didn't go through the conversion program when they came back from North Vietnam. So they go back. They either didn't want to fly or couldn't fly or whatever. So we would invite them just to go for an airplane ride, more or less. And a lot of them took us up on it throughout the years. So they had 4 of these fellows last year in a 4-ship, and they took them up for the ride. And so we all mustered out in front of the squadron to watch them come back to land. So John and I were standing there, and there were some other guys standing around, some IPs were standing around, and we got to chatting with them and listening to them banter. And there's this one, I think he was an 06. I know he was an 06. And he was carping to this major about the T-38, how slack it was with the onset of G being able to fill his G-suit, being able to inflate his G-suit. And he said he really struggled with that sometimes, that it did not have the response that his Ego Jet did. And the other guy said, yeah, I was a 16 guy. And he said, it just isn't anywhere near as responsive as the 16 was. And John looks at me, and I look at John, and John looks at this colonel and the major, and he said, you guys, he said, one of the things that we used to do when we were flying extended trail and high G maneuvers is we'd take our left hand here and reach down and push on that test button, that spring bob. Now in the 38, there is a test button that's on a spring. And when you push that down, it's like simulating G, and it allows air to come into your G-suit and inflate, and you can get a jump on things when you know that you're going to have an onset of G's. Well, these two knotheads look at each other like, huh? They never heard of doing anything like that. John says, we may not know a lot about a lot of things today, but we knew enough to push the button when we were going to do IG maneuvers. God, we've laughed over the year about that. At any rate, you could tell from when John was talking about it, you could tell these two guys, screw this 4-ship coming in, I want to go out and try that, see if it really works. Well, I hope it did. But anyway, it was just a lot of fun that day, and it's just as much fun sitting here telling you about that day and smiling about it as it was actually flying the sim and bantering with those guys that day. So with that, 4-ship it looks like is coming in, so is Bubbo. Bubbo, base gear, stop.